Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the NavalX Director, Captain Ben Van Buskirk, to help us kick off the NavalX track at Fed Supernova. Captain?
Ryan, and for everyone in Austin, I wish I was there. I was really looking forward to this trip, but on behalf of the whole Navy team, next time we'll try and get down there. Hopefully, the conditions will be such that we can come to Texas. I love what you're doing out there for the Capital Factory folks. My stepdad was a professor at University of Texas El Paso, and I really can't say enough how much I appreciate and enamored by how well the state of Texas is doing with building this ecosystem and with the partners like the Capital Factory for really trying to make this work and enhance their small businesses and build this defense and ecosystem. So thank you to everyone there. And then for everyone online, thank you for being here. For me, what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of NavalX. We have some great talks going on the rest of the day. And so I'm not going to go and steal anybody's thunder. So I'll give an overview, and I do want to make this as interactive as we can, even though we can't, even though I can't be there. I want to do the best that I can to try and at least answer some questions and resolve our barriers of distance. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen and go over a brief that I have, and then we'll do some questions. All right, we are up. I'm gonna go full screen. All right, so what I'm going to go over is really what is NavalX, a little bit of how we're different, and I would say different in the correct way, and how we really, I think, work symbiotically with the other innovation cells to help small businesses and bring capability to the Department of Defense. So me, Captain Van Buskirk, Director of NavalX, my background, I'm a Silicon Valley native, born and raised. My dad was an entrepreneur, small business type. I went to college, joined the Navy, was a naval aviator. 20 years after my command tour out in Japan, where I was command officer of a squadron, I did what was called a Secretary of Defense Executive Fellowship, where I spent a year and change at VMware out in Palo Alto. Primary role was in central engineering, but an opportunity to really see how the company worked. And as part of this fellowship, see plenty of other companies around the country and go visit them, talk to their executives, see how they ticked. And I think for me, the reason I bring that up is I think it helps me empathize with everyone out there that is trying to do business with the government. I see it from your side, both the goods and the others. And after that, I was brought in to stand up a new director on the OpNav staff. The OpNav staff is the Chief of Naval Operations Staff, who's in charge of really deciding what the requirements are and the funding lines for Navy systems. And so I'm at NavalX, and I'm a detail lead like every other member of NavalX. We're here part-time. We only have 16 people, so we're a pretty small group, but we're all detailed from other places around the acquisition ecosystem to help do our job here. So why NavalX? Why are we here? Is the bottom line is Secretary Hondo Gert stood us up about 2 years ago for a couple reasons. One is we're just not moving fast enough, and that's the bottom line. We need to go faster. And so we needed a special group set up that could operate in the white space of the org chart to move quicker and break down silos between the different organizations, both internally to the Navy and our communications with folks outside the Navy. And we figured we are positioned to drive and foster culture change. So one is the connecting of folks, and two is the foster culture change. Adam Grant said in his testimony on the Hill back in April that DoD's culture is a threat to national security. And so when Secretary Gut stood us up, he said, hey, we've got to go and attack culture change. Somebody needs to be doing this. And so that's a huge aspect of our role. And we have to really connect folks. And when we say culture changes, we got to get away from the culture of doing things in a silo just to ourselves in this sort of fear of working with industry. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that I learned as a fellow, and that really drew me to NavalX was that's why our role exists, is to be able to just have conversations and collaborate with industry, academia, and the rest of DoD and break down those barriers without the fear of something happening or say I can't talk to somebody. And I think that's one of the powers of NavalX, and I'll get into it in a little bit on what authorities we have. But the bottom line is we don't have contracting authority. We partner with other organizations within the Navy for their contracting authority. And because of that, it gives me a lot more flexibility between that and our partnership with industry, our partnership intermediary agreement, which is a contracting vehicle that we have among all the tech bridges. And Whitney, when she does her talk later on tech bridges, she'll talk a little bit about that. But with NavalX, we are a non-federal entity when we are on our premises. And so we can really, between that and partnering for context, we can really have some great conversations. Also, another reason is traditional R&D is changed over the last 30 years. Is the bottom line, the government is not the driving factor in R&D, is not the driving force. We're a very small percentage. It's really an industry where things are happening. And as a country, if we want to succeed as a Navy, we need to be able to leverage the best practices and the technologies and the R&D that are being done by you, the small businesses, and even the large businesses going on out there that aren't in the traditional DoD ecosystem. All right, and so we have to cultivate and mature these ideas, and really a key to that is having these linkages, not just with industry ourselves. NavalX, we're an enabling organization, so we do that by partnering with the DIUs and the ensigns and the AFWorks and the folks at Army Futures and SOFWorks. It's really, I think, core to how we work. The point I say down here on this next bullet is this takes time. It's relationships, all right? So often in the military, for those that haven't served, you go from rotation to rotation. And so you show up as a commanding officer, you assume the roles and responsibilities and relationships that previous CO had. I'm aware of it, and all of us at NavalX are aware that it takes time and trust to really build relationships to break down these barriers, and not just with us in industry, but with us and internally. So we are very relationship focused and need to really build those out. And the last point here is commitment from senior leadership. We continue to have advocacy from senior leadership across the Navy. Secretary Gertz has since transitioned and is still fighting for what we're doing here in the Navy, and he'll continue to do that when he gets out or on the outside. But on the internal side, we still pass the baton. So we have advocacy and leadership from inside the Navy. And so I'm going to go over very quickly what our overall mission and vision is. So I hit the plane, a platform for connecting and culture change, but number one always has to be guiding stakeholders to delivering capability to the warfighter, because otherwise all of this becomes innovation activity, right? Or innovation theater, as people would say. If you aren't be able to go and eventually at the end of the road be able to get something to a warfighter, then it doesn't, it's just activity. So number one is guiding stakeholders to deliver that capability. I was in actually a call with SOFWorks, and they said it really well. It's like getting the problem and the solution together. You're a small business, you've got a solution, you found somebody in the Navy who has a problem. That's like the helicopter ride to base camp. The rest is getting up Everest, and you can't do it alone. And so we need to be your guides to help get you to the top of the mountain. So both internally and externally, guiding stakeholders to get capability to the warfighter. Two, like I mentioned, is being that platform for connecting naval needs and challenges with solution providers across industry, academia, and DoD, and encourage and fostering culture change to make the Navy a more agile, learning, and adaptable organization. And from what I learned, and this came back to when I visited SpaceX as a fellow, everyone thought that SpaceX, I'm sure a lot of folks here are familiar with their story, but everyone thought they were crazy. And I really admire them in that, over a quadrillion, they were launching rockets and nothing was working. And eventually that rocket worked and they got people's attention. And so when I look at all this, I go, if we really want to, and my thoughts are, if we want to change culture, we need to show that we can bring capability to the fleet in a better way. And that's my goal. And our vision is to empower and inspire the naval workforce in connection with our partners to deliver high impact capabilities on time, every time. And so a bit about our organizational structure. Okay, I won't get into a whole lot of details here, but I'll just go over some of these terms that I think they're important for anyone who hasn't worked within the Navy before. So I'm there in the middle. I'm an 06. I'm a captain. I'm the NavalX director. As I mentioned before, I'm actually on detail like the rest of the NavalXers. When you look to the left-hand side of this, I come from the OpNav staff. That's the CNO staff. They're in charge of setting the requirements for what we need to acquire and for building the budgets. All right. I also have my fitness report. My boss is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. And that goes back to our founding by Secretary Gertz. So I'm also connected to that organization. And then to the right is our connection to the Chief of Navy Research, which is Admiral Selby, and you'll be hearing from him later. I kind of think of him as sort of the CTO of the Navy. Admiral Selby is in charge of really driving innovation in that early stage R&D and driving that different, how can we think differently? What's really that stuff that's on the edge that we need to get brought into our ecosystem? So I think it's a pretty cool place in the org chart. And that I have 3 bosses, but at the same time, all of them have said, just go do your mission and let us know we can help. And I think that's pretty awesome because this, when I describe NavalX, and this organizational relationship, we're sort of like grease. And that's what Secretary Stephanie, when he talked about us on the Hill, is we can see from 10,000 feet across the different vast parts of the organization and on the outside where we see connections happen, or we can see patterns. We can go, hey, well, let's grease the skids and bring this capability through, or at the same time, maybe glue, right? Where there's something that's really there, but it's just not sticking. How can I bring in folks from across the ecosystem to bring this to bear and get it through? And so those are my three bosses and our relationships with the three. And I think it works well because in the Navy, we've known, it's any large organization. And I saw this as a fellow too. It's really hard not to operate in silos. And so it's pretty fun being able to operate with me and my team in the white space of the org chart. I have a deputy who's a civilian. So I'm a uniform wearing aviator. My civilian deputy comes from a program executive office. He's a career scientist. He understands the civilian side. And I have my lines of effort below. And so I have my lines of effort now. Are these my only lines of effort? No. I view NavalX, when we were first founded, as Naval Expeditions. These are lines of effort that we're doing because we think they make sense. But I encourage any of my NavalXers, if you have an idea for a new line of effort that you think will be game-changing, let's look into it. And we can always add lines of effort. And so what I'm going to do is go in a little bit into each of these. And I won't go into huge details on tech bridges because Whitney will be briefing later, but I'll cover the others. So first I'll cover the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting. So what is this? This is where we take industry standard best practices, particularly in Scrum and Agile and human-centered design, really abstract the core concepts of those and apply them to the military. And so what we're doing is teaching our workforce, and I'm talking like out at the command level. So we're teaching young enlisted folks and young officers these new ways of thinking, new for the military. Why? Because we want to encourage lean, fast, and fix our culture to increase warfighting competitive advantage. And we know this is an industry best practice. So we need to go ahead and leverage these industry best practices, and teach our folks how to use them. So why is that? It goes to our changing culture, but also gives them the tools they need to solve. This isn't we're giving you this training so you can come back to us and we can go to OpNav for like a solution. The idea we have here is we want to give our folks the tools so they can go solve problems in different ways in their commands. And just some examples here, when I say CAW Arctic, we have a Centers for Adaptive Warfighting up in Alaska. And you just can see, I won't read off here, but here's some examples of where they've solved problems at their own level and addressing their challenges, their own challenges directly. I'll hit here. I think our Net Promoter Score is pretty good. It's another tool I learned from industry. Is an NPS of 97 is pretty awesome. So our folks are really digging the training. And they're able to, and they're promoting it. And like the rest of NavalX, this is totally bootstrapped. So we have Centers for Adaptive Warfighting around the country, and these have been stood up by folks wearing the uniform who've said, I want to go and teach this, and I want to teach this to my unit because it's valuable. And so I'll go into one of my later slides on where these have spread out across the country. I'll also point out, for example, of CAW Arctic, our director of CAW Arctic, the guy there in the picture, he's actually an Army guy. And so we're not just Navy, we're not constrained. And so we have Army, we have Marines make up over half of our CAW folks, Air Force, and of course, Naval Special Warfare. And we're trying to get out to the rest of the Navy fleet. But I think this is a pretty powerful tool we have. For one, changing culture, and two, sourcing problems. We've trained over 4,000 folks. So workforce agility is another line of effort that NavalX has. Think of this as the CAW, but this is one where we're actually, think of it as consulting that we do for problem solving at our NavalX facility. And so we do it at the facility, and we will go do offsite. And this is where commands go, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go. We'll come in and use these tools and actually do consulting and facilitation for other groups within the Navy. And you can see some of our numbers down here, and it keeps us really busy. I'd say with both CAW and workforce agility, we're literally limited by capacity because folks like what we bring. And we've had the highest levels of the Navy come in and use the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting for facilitating sessions and breaking down some of our toughest problems. But we do them at NavalX, and we will do offsite with our team. And another thing I love about CAW, and this goes into both CAW and workforce agility into changing culture, is we're rotationals. Like I said, guys and gals come for anywhere from 6 months to, I think our longest is, I think Mohawk Matt was there about 2 years. but that's not a lot of time. And so how can we make a real impact on folks in a limited amount of time they have with us at NavalX? And what I love about CAW and Workforce Agility is we can teach them these skills, and our folks can very quickly learn and then start facilitating. So even if somebody's only a rotational at NavalX for 6 months, they're going to leave with a fantastic skill set, and they're going to go off to their other commands, which are other parts of the Navy, whether it's a warfare center, which is a defense lab, or a program office. And I have a Naval Xer right now who is on Workforce Agility team who comes from PEO Joint Strike Fighter, which is like as big of a program office as we have out there. And then folks that are in uniform and go to the fleet. So it's really also a training ground. So it really meets two birds with one stone. Another one of our lines of effort is digital agility. And this is really going, how can we leverage digital tools, one for NavalX, so we can interact with industry, academia, and the rest of DoD better. But two, folks come to us with their problems. As anyone who's worked on the software side or of Navy acquisition, it's hard. ATOing is hard. Getting on contract is hard. So our team are really smart, at least in how to work with the Navy and how to get over some of your problems. So I know for my digital team, I highly encourage folks, if you're just kind of stuck or have a question, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to lend a hand on how to do business with the Navy, how to get your digital tools into the ecosystem. It's hard. All right, tech bridges, I'm going to give an overview here, but tech bridges, we have them spread out throughout the country, and they were one of the first lines of effort of NavalX. And the idea of a tech bridge is to sustain existing efforts that make us more agile, capable, and efficient. As you can see, the overall theme here with NavalX is we're not going out and creating new things for ourselves. It's all to help greater Navy be better. And I fundamentally believe that's the right way to go about it. And so these tech bridges are a connected network to enhance collaboration among our labs, which are our warfare centers, and industry, academia, and other branches of the military. So we're spread out across the country, and each warfighting lab has a certain specialty. If you go to our website and hit tech bridges, we have lists of the different areas that these tech bridges specialize in. And then we have a button to contact us, fill out your information, and one of our folks from our tech bridges will get a hold of you, whatever makes the most sense on the type of technology you have. But we're there to make connections, one, with external industry, because we think, and I do believe this, that there's technology out there that we're just not seeing because you're not part of the traditional defense ecosystem. We think that we got to get you into our ecosystem and into our labs and into our program offices, so that technology, that game-changing technology, can be used by the warfighter. But we also are here to break down barriers internally. Anyone who's worked in R&D in a large organization knows that there's barriers and people don't talk. But through our tech bridges, we have our own internal labs talking to each other. And so you can see over 20,000 connections, government, industry, and 11 partnership intermediate agreements, which are one of our contracting vehicles that we use for outreach. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of details on what a partnership intermediary agreement is, but think of it as a nonprofit that exists to enhance collaboration between us as the DoD and the government and you as industry, and they facilitate those interactions. And their facilities are designed such that we can have conversations that you couldn't have on a federal property. And that's what our NavalX facility is, and that's what the rest of our tech bridges have. And we are also building out to overseas. We have one set up in London, and you can see we've already helped with some abstracts and working on proposals for those. They've done proposals and gotten prize challenges through funding from Office of Naval Research. So a bit on our locations. So here's where we are. You see NavalX, where we stood up over there in Washington. All of these are locations where we have either Centers for Adaptive Warfighting or tech bridges. Some of our tech bridges are more mature than others. For example, like Central Florida or Northeast, they've been around for quite some time from the beginning. Other ones are new, like in Hawaii. You can also see the CAW locations, CAW East down at Camp Lejeune, CAW West at Camp Penn, and then, of course, north up in Alaska, and Okinawa is another one in Japan. I think what's very powerful is their Centers for Adaptive Warfighting and tech bridges are international. And you may have seen in the news, Task Force 59, we have Captain Brasser coming to speak later today, who's the Commodore there. We're working with Task Force 59 on how can we leverage the tech bridge ecosystem for what they're doing out in the Middle East. Okay, and so this slide, I really, I'll let Whitney talk to more detail when she briefs later on, but this is really the expanded network of who we are. So we have lots of partnerships, okay, across industry, academia, and defense. So if you just get your foot in the door talking to a tech bridge, we'll be able to connect you with the right folks. And that goes back to having that 10,000 foot view in the org chart and be grease and glue to bring folks together. All right, so the last slide I'm going to talk about today, and I have some others if, depending on how the questions go, but here's the last one I really want to talk about is our way ahead for 2021 and what are we doing? What are our near-term opportunities? What are we focusing on? And then, like I said, I want to hear from you all and get your questions. So number one is advancing unmanned systems. This is hot on our list. The CNO has formed a unmanned task force. We're developing it right. Well, it's in development. We're putting the crossing the T's and dotting the I's on it now in support of developing unmanned systems. And so NavalX hasn't been involved from the beginning on that. And us as across our lines of effort are there to support that high-level Navy initiative. The second goes into being able to scale Mount Everest in collaboration with the Chief of Naval Research, OBNAV, RDA, and some of our partners in industry and Stanford University. We're putting together, based on the Hacking for Defense program, an Innovation Navigator program where we're actually going to be doing our first in-person lessons later on in October. We're going to go and learn from the best in the business on how innovation happens, the standard innovation pipeline that's used in industry. Apply that to what we're doing with the NavalX pipeline and through our unmanned task force with continuing follow-on, just like they would do at Stanford's Hacking for Defense, with government people having done this training and learning it and applying it. And so that's a program that we're standing up, and I'm really excited about that. Also is accelerating our tech bridges. I mentioned it briefly, but we're looking at how can we leverage the tech bridge ecosystem in Japan, the Middle East, and Australia. Japan's a lot closer. Whitney can give more details on the timeline on that, but these do take time and work. The other two are in work, and as you've seen in the news, there's a lot of reasons why we want to partner with these other countries. Scaling and adopting the CAW, all right? Like I mentioned before, we're a bootstrap startup, so a lot of times you hit that wall. How do you scale what we're doing? And so part of that is working with our digital teams to really enhance the number of online and remote courses we're giving and our remote problem solving sessions. But also, for me, I think a lot of folks in this room, either at the Capital Factory or dialed in, are reservists. And so I think using our reservists is a huge opportunity that us, at least I think across DoD, we're still trying to crack the code on. Like, how can we best leverage these reservists who may be a reserve lieutenant but working for an Amazon, or a reserve lieutenant who's working for one of your startups? And how do we scale that? And how do we leverage that for NavalX? And then fleet outreach. You've heard me talk a lot about acquisition and the acquisition workforce and research and defense and acquisition, but we also want to reach the fleet, right? Because when we look at problem sets, I think the fleet is a great source for problems, and no one in Congress, no one in the Navy is going to sit there and tell you that, oh, we don't like this problem, even though it has been identified as a core fleet problem. So continuing our fleet outreach, both at the high level and at the lower levels, because I think they're, going back to that, being able to see things from 10,000 feet. If we're getting really common problems from sailors across different aspects of the fleet, 6th Fleet saying something out in the Med, you're getting some from 3rd Fleet in San Diego, something from 7th Fleet, there's some there, and we can use our communication tools and our leverage and our chain of command to bring things to light that haven't been brought to light, maybe got missed by the acquisition system, and get that foot in the door for those. And then, of course, strategic communications and engagement, as NavalX and as all of our defense innovation, communicating what we do and how we do it is critically important, and then engaging with industry at events like this. And then part of strategic engagement, I'll also say, is making sure we're engaged with our local Congress, with the Hill, and with senior leaders of the Navy. And we have a new Secretary of the Navy, as those know, and so we're working with the SecNav staff and at the highest levels to ensure that what we're doing is supportive of the Secretary and his vision for going ahead. For key focus areas, I'll just cover very quickly before I go to questions. We're a small group. That's the point I want to make there. We don't have a lot. We have tech bridge directors, but they're also all bootstrapping. So that's how we roll. But we leverage the power of our network to move things forward. I've really hit a lot of these other ones on how do we create more agility? How do we drive more agility through the core of the Navy to make them better? How do you define success? This is something I'm working with, actually, a company out of San Francisco that does Fortune 500 work. How do you define success and changing culture? What are the metrics for that? Because it's a little bit touchy-feely, right? But there are metrics you can use to know if we're actually moving the needle. Are we actually changing culture or not? And I've really hit the others on breaking silos, driving change, and of course, moving and improving our deal flows. We get deals through the NavalX TechBridge ecosystem. So the quote I see down here about that's from a conversation I had with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, when I was a fellow, and I asked how he changed Microsoft. And he says every CEO I've talked to has said this, is everyone wants to create these innovation cells just to kind of be cool. But that's just cool. That's innovation theater. That's being cool by association. If you really want to make change, it has to be driven from the top and adopted through the core of the organization to be successful. And that's the philosophy we have at NavalX is really building that ground up support, but having that senior level advocacy to drive change. And it's not about NavalX being great, but for our efforts to change the Navy and who they are, and the Navy and how we operate is really what our goal is. So with that, I'll stop sharing and really take the last few minutes that we have here to just take some questions that you may have. All right, so let's see. It looks like we have a question. Let me see if I can figure out how to see my question. Okay, so question. Let's see, is what metrics do we have that indicate how much faster evolving tech is getting out to warfighters since NavalX started? And once again, that goes back to, that's the challenge, right? Is how much faster is it going? And the answer is we really haven't moved the needle much yet. NavalX has been around for about 2 years. And one of the challenges that we have is, and I think every innovation cell has mentioned this, is you need resources, people, and authority to really move things. And at NavalX, we have borrowed people, we have a small amount of resources, and we don't have a lot of authority. So everything we have to do is through influencing, right? And so right now, it's the acquisition system is doing the acquisition system, right? And so we got a long ways to go. But what I can say is that leadership is aware, and we're all aware that we need to move faster, but we need to crack that code. And I think cracking the code, when it comes down to it, is who are the folks that are the ones that are actually doing the buying, and those are the program offices. And a lot of that challenge has to do with, you said it's complicated. You got Congress involved, resourcing requirements involved. So it's a work in progress, and we're going to get there. But I do think with the way we're approaching this unmanned task force, which is a new cross-functional team, all right, it's a new way of doing business. It's a way to really move faster, to get through the walls that we've seen happen because of the bureaucratic processes in place right now. But no, it's a wicked problem, and I think when you look at good news stories on how we've been able to move faster, I think particularly what you've seen with AFWorks on SBIR phase 1s and 2s, and DIU on the higher TRL stuff using adaptive acquisition, as in OTAs and commercial solution offerings. I think those are really good, and so what we're doing right now is how do we go in and take something like a CSO and get more Navy folks to use it, and that's part of our role.